The forest was quiet, which should have been Nora's first warning. She'd learned over the years that true silence in the wilderness meant predators, and predators meant danger. But she was tired, bone-deep exhausted from 3 weeks of traveling between packs, offering her healing services for whatever scraps of food and shelter they'd spare. Her white hair hung limp around her shoulders. Her pale skin was smudged with dirt, and her gray eyes stung from lack of sleep. She should have stopped hours ago, but the nearest settlement was still a day's walk away, and sleeping alone in the forest had never bothered her before. She'd been doing it since she was 15, since the rogue attack that killed her parents and left her an orphan with no pack willing to take in a girl who looked like a ghost. Nora's appearance had always been a problem. Her hair was white as fresh snow, her skin so pale it was almost translucent, and her eyes were the color of winter storms. She wasn't quite albino, the healers had told her parents, but close enough that other wolves found her unsettling. Unnatural, a bad omen. When her parents died protecting their small pack from rogues, no one fought very hard to keep their strange-looking daughter. She'd been given a bag of supplies and pointed toward the border before her parents were even buried. That was 7 years ago. 7 years of wandering, of offering her healing gift to anyone who'd pay, of never staying long enough to form attachments. She was good at healing. Her parents had both been gifted healers, and they'd trained her well. But no amount of skill could make people comfortable around someone who looked like death itself. The cry that shattered the silence was high-pitched and terrified. A wolf cub. Nora froze, every instinct screaming at her to keep walking. Wolf cubs meant protective parents nearby. Protective parents meant territorial adult wolves who wouldn't appreciate a stranger approaching their young. But the cry came again, weaker this time, followed by a whimper that went straight through her heart. She was moving before she could talk herself out of it, following the sound through dense undergrowth. Her healing sense, the magical awareness that let her feel injuries and illness in living things, suddenly flared to life. Pain. So much pain. The cub was badly hurt. Nora burst through a thicket of brambles and stopped dead. The wolf cub was small, couldn't be more than a few months old, with pure, white fur matted with blood. It was dragging itself across the forest floor, one hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle, deep gashes across its back still bleeding freely. And standing between the cub and the trees were 3 rogues in wolf form, scarred and mangy, their eyes gleaming with malicious intent. This wasn't a hunt. This was torture. They were playing with the cub, letting it try to escape before dragging it back, enjoying its terror. "Hey!" Nora shouted before her brain could stop her mouth. "Get away from it!" The 3 rogues turned to look at her, and she saw the moment they registered what she was. A lone Omega, unarmed, defenseless. One of them shifted to human form, a tall man with a scarred face and cruel eyes. "Well, well," he said, voice rough. "The moon goddess must be smiling on us today. First we get to kill the little prince, and now we get a pretty little Omega to play with. Though you're a strange-looking thing, aren't you? Like a corpse that forgot to die." Prince. Nora's mind raced, white fur, being hunted by rogues who specifically wanted to kill it. Oh no, this wasn't just any cub. This was someone important, someone whose death would matter. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nora said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But you need to leave that cub alone and get out of here." The rogue laughed, and the other 2 shifted to human form as well, flanking her. "Or what? You going to fight us, little ghost girl? You don't even have a pack. I can smell it on you. You're nobody, nothing. And nobody's going to care when we're done with you." He was right. She was nobody. No pack would avenge her death. No one would even know she was gone. But that cub, that tiny white wolf bleeding on the ground, was somebody. And Nora had spent 7 years being nobody. She was tired of being nothing. Tired of walking past suffering because getting involved was too dangerous. tired of surviving when she'd stopped living years ago. "You're right," she said quietly, reaching into her pack. "I am nobody, which means I've got nothing to lose." She pulled out the knife her father had given her, the only weapon she owned, and launched herself at the nearest rogue. The fight was brutal and desperate. Nora wasn't a warrior. She'd had basic self-defense training from her father, but she was a healer, not a fighter. The rogues were bigger, stronger, trained to kill. But she had surprise on her side, and more importantly, she had rage. Years of accumulated anger at a world that had treated her like garbage, at packs that had used her skills then thrown her out, at the unfairness of being punished for things she couldn't control. She got the first rogue in the throat, her knife finding the major artery before he could block. He went down gurgling, blood spraying. The second one grabbed her from behind, his claws raking across her ribs, tearing through cloth and flesh. Nora screamed but used the momentum to drive her elbow into his face, breaking his nose. When he loosened his grip, she spun and stabbed upward, catching him under the chin. The blade went through his mouth and into his brain. He dropped. The third rogue, seeing his companions fall, shifted back to wolf form and lunged. Nora tried to dodge, but she was too slow, too injured. His teeth sank into her shoulder, shaking her like a rag doll. She felt bones crack, felt her knife slip from nerveless fingers. He threw her against a tree. She hit hard, sliding down to the ground. Through blurring vision, she saw him stalking toward the cub, which had been trying to crawl away during the fight. No, she hadn't gone through all this just to fail now. Nora's healing sense was screaming at her, listing her injuries in clinical detail. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, shattered shoulder, deep lacerations across her abdomen, internal bleeding. She was dying. She had minutes at best. But her gift wasn't just for sensing injuries. It was for healing them. And healing was just moving life energy from one place to another, encouraging the body to repair itself faster. She'd been taught to be careful with it, to never push too hard, to never drain herself dangerously low. She'd never been taught what happened if you pushed past your limits, if you gave everything. Nora reached deep inside herself, past the reservoir of energy she normally used for healing, past the safety limits her parents had drilled into her, down to the very core of her life force. And she pulled. Power flooded through her, raw and primal and agonizing. This wasn't normal healing magic. This was something older, something that felt like it was tearing her apart from the inside. Life Weaver. A distant part of her mind whispered. The ancient gift. The forbidden one. She threw all of it at the rogue, not to heal, but to drain. Life energy could flow both ways. She ripped the vitality from his body, watching in grim satisfaction as he collapsed mid-step, aged decades in seconds, his fur going gray and patchy before he stopped breathing entirely. The backlash hit her like a physical blow. Using life-weaving to kill instead of heal was apparently not recommended. Nora would have laughed if she'd had the breath for it. She crawled toward the cub, every movement sending fresh waves of agony through her body. The little wolf was watching her with frightened blue eyes, whimpering. Up close, she could see he was beautiful. His white fur pristine except where blood marred it. Royal bloodlines always bred true. If the rogue had called him Little Prince, that meant this cub belonged to one of the ruling families. Maybe even the Alpha King himself. "Hey, sweetheart," Nora whispered, reaching out with a shaking hand to stroke his head. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." The cub whined and tried to lick her hand. His injuries were severe, but not immediately fatal like hers. If she used her gift to heal him, she'd have nothing left for herself. She'd die. But if she didn't heal him, he might not make it until help arrived. He'd lost so much blood. That leg would never heal right without magical intervention. Those gashes on his back were deep enough to risk infection. Really, it wasn't even a choice. "This is going to feel weird," she told him, placing both hands on his small body. "But it'll help. I promise." Nora reached for her gift again, but this time she didn't pull from the rogue or from the forest around them. She pulled from herself, from her own life force, the very energy that kept her heart beating and her lungs working. Life weaving let you transfer vitality between living things. She'd always been taught you could only transfer what someone had to spare. Her parents had apparently never been desperate enough to test the limits. Nora poured everything she had into the cub. She felt his broken legs straighten and knit back together, felt the gashes on his back close and seal, new fur already growing over pink skin, felt his strength returning, his breathing evening out, his pain fading. She gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left to give. The world was going dark around the edges. Her heart was slowing. Her breathing had stopped at some point, and she hadn't even noticed. The cub was healed, completely, perfectly healed. He was nuzzling her face, whining in distress, as if he understood what she'd done for him. "It's okay," Nora slurred, her words barely audible. "You're going to be fine. Someone will find you. Someone important, probably. You're too pretty to be a nobody like me." Her eyes closed. She felt herself falling, but distantly, like it was happening to someone else. This was a good death, she thought. Better than dying alone with no one to mourn her. At least she'd saved someone. At least her last act had mattered. The darkness swallowed her whole. She didn't see the cub throw back his head and howl, a sound far too powerful for something so small. She didn't see the way the howl rippled through the forest, carrying a frequency that only certain bloodlines could hear. And she didn't see the wolves that began to arrive. First came the wild ones, white wolves that lived deep in the ancient forest, drawn by the pulse of Lifeweaver magic that had exploded through the area when Nora used her gift. They emerged from the trees slowly, cautiously, forming a circle around the fallen woman and the cub. They could sense what she was, what she'd done, and they recognized power when they felt it. This was a Lifeweaver, the first one in 300 years, and she'd used her gift to save a child. That made her sacred. That made her worth protecting. More wolves came, drawn by the cub's howl and the gathering of the wild ones. These were different, larger, all with pristine white fur that marked them as royal guard. And at the center of them, running faster than the rest, came the largest wolf Nora never got to see. Ryder, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, burst into the clearing and shifted to human form before he'd even finished skidding to a stop. His hair was pale gold, almost white in the moonlight, and his eyes were the same brilliant blue as the cub's. He took in the scene with a single glance. 3 dead rogues, 1 tiny white cub howling over the body of a woman, and that woman lying in a pool of her own blood, so pale she looked like a ghost. No, not a ghost. She was breathing, barely. The faintest movement of her chest, the weakest flutter of a pulse in her neck. She was alive, but only just. Ryder's wolf was screaming at him, clawing at his consciousness with an urgency he'd never felt before. Mate, mate, mate. The bond hit him like a lightning strike, powerful and undeniable and terrifying. This woman, this stranger who'd somehow ended up in the middle of the forest with his son, was his true mate. His son. Finn. Ryder's heart had been in his throat for the past 3 hours, ever since the attack on their traveling party had resulted in Finn being taken. He'd tracked them for miles, following the scent of his cub and the rogues who'd stolen him, praying he'd be fast enough. He'd expected to find his son dead or dying. He'd expected to have to kill the rogues himself, slowly and painfully. He hadn't expected to find them already dead, killed by an Omega who looked like she'd barely survived the fight herself. No, not survived. She hadn't survived. She was dying right now in front of him. "Healers!" Ryder roared, even as he dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her body, afraid to touch and cause more damage. Now! 2 wolves from his guard shifted and ran back toward the camp they'd left behind. The others formed a defensive perimeter, and Finn, his brave, foolish, beloved son, crawled into Ryder's lap and whined, pawing at his father's chest. Ryder wrapped one arm around his cub, holding him close, feeling the overwhelming relief of having him back safe and whole. But his eyes never left the woman. She looked so young, maybe mid-20s, with features that would have been beautiful if they weren't slack with unconsciousness and gray with blood loss. Her white hair was spread around her head like a halo, matted with blood and dirt. But it was her hands that caught his attention. They were resting on Finn's fur, even in unconsciousness, as if she'd been petting him when she collapsed. And there was a faint glow around those hands, a shimmer of magic that Ryder recognized from old texts and ancient stories. "Lifeweaver," he breathed. "You're a lifeweaver." That explained everything. Why Finn was perfectly healthy despite the blood matting his fur. Why this woman was dying despite being young and presumably strong. She'd used the forbidden gift, the one that let you transfer life force itself. She'd saved Finn by giving him her own vitality. She'd been willing to die for a cub she didn't know, for his son, his heir. And she was his mate, though she likely didn't even know it yet. Ryder made a decision right then, kneeling in the blood-soaked dirt with his son in his arms and his dying mate at his feet. She'd saved the most precious thing in his world. She'd given everything to protect a child she'd never met. He would move heaven and earth to save her in return. The healers arrived within minutes, 3 of them, the best he had. They took one look at the woman, and their faces went grim. "Your Majesty," the head healer, an older woman named Vera, said carefully, "I don't know if—" "You will save her," Ryder said, and there was no room for argument in his voice. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care if you have to work miracles. She saved my son. She's a lifeweaver, and she's my mate. You will not let her die." Vera's eyes widened at that declaration, but she nodded sharply and got to work. The other 2 healers joined her, their hands glowing with healing magic as they worked frantically to stabilize the worst injuries. Internal bleeding first, then the punctured lung, then the broken bones. They worked for 20 minutes straight, sweating and straining, pouring every bit of their power into keeping this strange woman alive. Finally, Vera sat back, wiping her forehead. "She's stable, barely. She'll need constant care for the next week at least, possibly longer. But she should survive." The relief that flooded through Ryder was almost painful. "Get a stretcher. We're taking her back to the palace immediately." Finn whined and refused to move from where he was curled against the woman's side. He'd shifted at some point during the healing, back to his small human form, a 2-year-old boy with pale blonde hair and his mother's blue eyes. He was clinging to the woman's arm, tears streaming down his face. Don't let her die," he sobbed. "She saved me. The bad men were hurting me, and she made them stop. She's nice. Don't let her die." Ryder's heart clenched. Finn had barely spoken since his mother's death in childbirth 2 years ago. He'd been slowly withdrawing, becoming quieter and more fearful. And now here he was, speaking in full sentences, begging for the life of a stranger who'd sacrificed everything to protect him. "She's not going to die," Ryder promised, gently scooping his son into his arms. "I swear it, Finn. She's going to be okay. And when she wakes up, you can thank her yourself." The journey back to the palace took 3 days. They had to move slowly to avoid jostling her too much, stopping frequently so the healers could reinforce their work. Ryder barely slept, spending most of his time sitting watch over her, one hand holding his son, and the other resting near enough to his mate that he could feel her weak heartbeat through their bond. He learned everything he could about her during those 3 days. Her name was Nora, according to the papers in her pack. She was a traveling healer with no pack affiliation, 22 years old. Born to Samuel and Lydia, both deceased. No living family listed. She owned almost nothing of value. Some healing supplies, a spare set of clothes, her father's knife still sticky with rogue blood, and a small book that turned out to be her mother's journal of healing recipes. She was alone in the world. Had been alone since she was 15. 7 years of wandering by herself, probably facing prejudice and suspicion because of her unusual appearance. 7 years of surviving day to day with no home to return to. Not anymore, Ryder thought. She has a home now, whether she wants it or not. She had a mate and a cub who'd imprinted on her so hard that Finn threw screaming fits any time they tried to separate him from her for more than a few minutes. She had a future, if Ryder had anything to say about it. When they finally reached the palace, Ryder had her installed in a suite of rooms right next to his own. The healers set up a rotation to watch her around the clock. Finn refused to leave her side, sleeping in a small cot next to her bed, holding her hand even in sleep. It took 6 days for her to wake up. 6 days of watching her chest rise and fall, of feeling the mate bond slowly strengthen as her body healed, of his son talking to her unconscious form about everything and nothing, as if his words could pull her back. On the 6th day, just after dawn, her eyes opened. Ryder was there. He was always there. He watched as she blinked slowly, her gray eyes confused and unfocused. She tried to sit up and immediately gasped in pain, falling back against the pillows. "Easy," Ryder said softly, moving to her side. "You're safe. You're in the palace. You've been unconscious for 6 days." Nora's eyes finally focused on him, and Ryder saw the moment she took in his appearance, the recognition of power in his bearing, the understanding of who exactly she was talking to. But there was no fear in her eyes, just exhaustion and confusion. "The cub," she croaked, voice rough from disuse. "Is he—" "He's fine," Ryder assured her. "Thanks to you. He's right here, actually. He hasn't left your side since we brought you in." He gestured to the small cot where Finn was curled up, still holding her hand in his sleep. The sight made Nora's eyes fill with tears. "I thought I died," she whispered. "I gave him everything. I didn't think there'd be anything left." "You almost did die," Ryder said honestly. "You used the Lifeweaver gift. You gave my son your own life force to heal him. Do you understand how rare that gift is? How dangerous?" Nora's eyes widened. "Lifeweaver? But that's supposed to be extinct. Lost for centuries. I'm just a healer. I didn't mean to." "You awakened it," Ryder explained gently. "In a moment of pure sacrifice, trying to save someone you didn't even know. That's how the gift works, according to the old texts. It only manifests in those with the purest intentions." He paused, studying her face. "My name is Ryder. I'm Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and the cub you saved is my son, Finn, my only child, the heir to my throne. You didn't just save a random pup. You saved my everything." The implications seemed to hit her all at once. Nora closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I didn't know. He was so small, and they were going to kill him. I couldn't let them kill him." "I know," Ryder said, softly. "That's what makes you extraordinary. You saw a child in danger and you didn't hesitate. You gave everything to protect him." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else you need to know. When I found you, I felt the bond. The mate bond. You're my true mate, Nora." Her eyes flew open, shock written across her features. "That's not possible. I'm nobody. I don't even have a pack. The moon goddess paired you with me because you're exactly what I need," Ryder interrupted. "Someone brave enough to fight impossible odds. Someone selfless enough to die for a stranger's child. Someone strong enough to unlock a gift that's been lost for 300 years. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her free hand. "I'm not asking you to accept it right away. I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that you're safe here. You have a place here, and my son has clearly decided you're his person, so you're not getting rid of us easily." As if summoned by his words, Finn stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw Nora was awake, his whole face lit up. "You're awake! Duh, she's awake! I told you she'd wake up!" He scrambled onto the bed carefully, avoiding her injuries, and threw his small arms around her neck. "Thank you for saving me. The bad men were scary, and you made them go away. You're so brave. Will you stay? Please stay. I don't want you to go." Nora looked overwhelmed by the enthusiastic toddler attached to her, but Ryder saw something soft and warm bloom in her eyes. "Hey, sweetheart," she said gently, awkwardly patting his back. "I'm glad you're okay. You're all healed up, right? Nothing hurts?" "Nothing hurts," Finn confirmed. "You fixed me all up. Da says you gave me your life to make me better. That means you're my hero, and also you're pretty like snow. I like snow." Despite everything, despite the pain and confusion and overwhelming nature of the situation, Nora laughed. It was weak and shaky, but genuine. "I like snow too," she said softly. 3 months later. Over the following weeks, Nora recovered slowly. Ryder made sure she had everything she could possibly need. The best food, comfortable clothes, books to read, peace and quiet when she needed it. But more than anything, he gave her space. He didn't push the mate bond, didn't demand anything from her. Just let her heal and adjust. Finn, on the other hand, had no concept of personal space. He was attached to Nora's hip from the moment she could get out of bed. He followed her everywhere, chattering about his toys and his lessons and everything else his 2-year-old brain could think of. At first, Nora seemed unsure of how to handle him, awkward with the physical affection and constant attention. But slowly, Ryder watched her defenses crumble. Watched her start to smile when Finn came running. Watched her automatically reach for him when he stumbled. Watched her become the mother Finn had never had. Not because the mate bond demanded it, but because she genuinely cared for the small boy who'd decided she hung the moon. The Life Weaver gift was another matter. Nora was terrified of it, afraid to use it, afraid of what it might do. Ryder brought in scholars, ancient texts, anyone who might have information. They learned together that life weaving wasn't just about transferring vitality. It was about balance, about understanding the flow of life energy in all living things. With practice and training, Nora learned to heal without draining herself dangerously. She learned to sense illness before it manifested, to strengthen someone's life force without taking from her own. She became invaluable to the palace healers, teaching them techniques that had been lost for centuries. But the real breakthrough came when she discovered she could sense emotional wounds as well as physical ones, could help heal trauma, ease anxiety, soothe nightmares. It was that aspect of her gift that finally helped Finn begin to process his mother's death, helped him understand that it was okay to love someone new without betraying the mother he'd never known. 3 months after Nora first woke up in the palace, Ryder found her in the gardens with Finn. It was a warm afternoon, and they were making flower crowns. "For you, Da," Finn announced when he noticed Ryder approaching, holding up a lopsided crown of daisies. "We made you pretty." Ryder obligingly bent down so his son could place the crown on his head, earning a delighted giggle. "Very pretty," he agreed solemnly. "Thank you, Finn." Nora smiled, her own crown of wildflowers sitting crookedly on her white hair. She looked so different from the dying woman Ryder had found in the forest. Healthy now, with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. Happy. "Finn, why don't you go show your crown to Healer Vera?" Ryder suggested. "I bet she'd love to see it." "Okay." Finn bounced to his feet and ran off toward the palace. Ryder sat down on the bench next to Nora, close, but not touching. "He loves you," he said quietly. "You know that, right? Not because of what you did for him, but because you're patient with him and kind to him, and you make him feel safe." Nora looked down at her flower crown, fingers tracing the petals. "I love him too," she admitted. "I didn't expect to. I never thought about having children. Never thought I'd get the chance with no pack and no mate. But Finn, he's special. Being with him makes me feel like maybe I'm not just a wanderer anymore, Like maybe I could be someone's mother. You could be his mother, Nora, if you wanted to be, Ryder said softly. He needs one. And I think you need him just as much as he needs you. I'm not his mother, Nora said, but there was no conviction in her voice. His mother died. You're the woman who's raised him for the past 3 months, Ryder said. The one who kisses his bruises and reads him stories. The one he runs to when he has nightmares. The one whose room he sneaks into every night because he feels safer sleeping close to you. Biology doesn't make someone a mother. Love does. Nora's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. What if I'm not good enough? I don't know how to be a mother. Neither did his biological mother, Ryder pointed out gently. She died before she could hold him. But you know what you do have? You have a gift for understanding emotions, for healing trauma, for making people feel valued. You saved his life once. Now you're saving it again every single day, just by being here. He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. And you have me. We can figure this out together. We can be his parents together, if you'll let us. Nora looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. The mate bond, she said hesitantly. I can feel it now. I didn't before, when I was too weak. But now it's there, pulling at me, telling me you're mine. I've felt it since the moment I saw you, Ryder admitted. Lying in the dirt, covered in blood, barely breathing, and all I could think was mine. My mate. The woman I've been waiting for my whole life. He squeezed her hand gently. But I want to be clear about something, Nora. I don't want you to feel pressured by the bond. I don't want you to accept me because fate demands it. If we do this, I want it to be because you choose me. Not because the moon goddess says we're meant to be together, but because you wake up every day and decide you want to be with me. That's a lot of pressure, Nora said, but she was smiling slightly. What if I decide I don't want to be with you? Then I'll respect your choice, Ryder said seriously. You'll still have a place here. You'll still be Finn's guardian if you want to be. The mate bond doesn't give me ownership of you. It's a gift, not a chain. And gifts can be declined. Nora studied his face for a long moment, her gray eyes searching. You mean that? She said, wonder in her voice. You'd really let me go if I asked? I'd let you go, Ryder confirmed. But I'd really prefer if you stayed. And I'd really prefer if eventually you'd consider accepting the bond. Because I think we could be amazing together. I think you could be not just Finn's mother, but my partner. My equal. My Luna. I've never been anyone's equal, Nora said quietly. I've always been the weird one, the ghost girl, the outsider. People tolerate me because I'm useful, not because they value me. I value you, Ryder said firmly, not because you're useful, though you are. Not because you saved my son, though I'll be grateful for that every day of my life. But because you're smart and strong and kind, even after the world gave you every reason not to be. Because you make my son laugh. Because when I look at you, I see my future. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Take your time. There's no rush. We have all the time in the world. But know that I'm here, waiting, hoping, ready to build something amazing with you whenever you're ready. Nora didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned forward and rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust that meant more than any declaration. They sat like that for a long time, flower crowns on their heads and fingers entwined, while Finn's laughter drifted across the garden. It took another month before Nora came to Ryder's study one evening, her expression nervous but determined. I've decided, she said without preamble, about the bond, about us. Ryder's heart was pounding, but he kept his expression calm. And I want to try, Nora said. Not because fate says we should, but because you've been patient with me. Because you gave me space to heal and time to think. Because you let me fall in love with your son without expecting anything in return. Because when I imagine my future now, you're in it. Both of you. Relief and joy flooded through Ryder so intensely, he almost couldn't breathe. You're sure? You can still change your mind. I meant what I said about... Nora stepped forward and kissed him, cutting off his rambling. It was soft and tentative, their first kiss, and it made the mate bond flare so brightly between them that they both gasped. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nora smiled. I'm sure I want this. I want you. I want to be Finn's mother and your mate and the Luna of this pack. I want to stop running and start living. I want a family. Then you have one, Ryder said, pulling her close. You have us, for as long as you'll have us. The mating ceremony was held under the full moon a week later, with Finn serving as the ring bearer and nearly dropping the banns 3 times. The entire pack attended, along with representatives from neighboring territories. But the most unusual guests were the white wolves that emerged from the forest, wild ones who'd never been seen near the palace before. They formed a circle around the ceremony, a protective honor guard for the life weaver who'd brought their kind and shifters together. When Ryder marked Nora, claiming her as his mate and Luna before the entire assembly, the bond between them settled into place perfectly. Not a chain binding her against her will, but a choice they'd both made freely. A partnership built on respect and trust and love. Finn cheered louder than anyone, then demanded to know if this meant Nora was officially his mother now. Yes, Nora said, kneeling down to H.